Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us here today. I am Nick Kanoki, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I am excited for a conversation with David Totman. He's been on the show before and always good to have him back. He's gotten some new titles in recent time. I won't read them all, but they're on screen for you. And I think we'll be touching on most of that in the upcoming session. Before we get underway, thanks to our Platinum member Onuma System, as well as our patron members, Definitive Logic, ABS Quality Evaluations, CGI, and Jacobs. All our organizational members, big thank you. Allows us to do programming like this in our newsletter. And if you're out there thinking you would like to work with us, please reach out. We'd like to partner with every organization in the world. And now some upcoming events. November 9th, next Thursday at 3, we have a keynote from Philip A. Washington, who is CEO at Denver International Airport. And this is part of our airport's asset leadership board. And these three, again, missing the photo from Michael Wood, but we'll get there. We have a good panel discussion following Philip's keynote. So next Thursday, hope to see you there this time. And then last plug for the ALN A55K Professional Certification Training course that is starting very soon. So please reach out to us or the Andrew James Advisory Group now if you have interest. I can promise you it is worth your time. And with that, we'll say if you're out there watching, we'd love to hear from you. So please send any comments, questions, or feedback to the chat. Or you can use the Q&A function of this Zoom webinar. And with that, Mike Bordenero, Executive Director, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. And last week I asked you about a weather report in Lander, Wyoming. You said it snowed. Well, it snowed on Halloween here in Chicago. Poor kids got kind of snowed out. And welcome, David. You're joining us from Southern California?
That's right, Los Angeles, where it did not snow last night on Halloween. Or I should say the day before.
Yeah, but I loved how you have said in the past when talking about the changing environment, it snowed in Los Angeles. There's snow in my backyard. That's different.
Yes, March of this year, a first ever, right? So we do have extreme weather, and I have video of it in my backyard. Yes.
Well, we are very excited to have you here. The very first week since you've been named Director of Infrastructure. Let me get this right. Director Infrastructure Industry Strategist in the AEC division.
Yes.
I really like that title. And I don't know if it's a promotion or just a title change, but it's like, I want to talk to the Director of Infrastructure Industry Strategy.
Oh, yes. You know, and I'm excited with that as well. It's not like I have this massive unlimited budget and hundreds of employees, right? This is more of a positioning, right? We Innovyze has been on the executive team as a VP of Innovyze, and we were acquired by Autodesk, and we are now kind of fully integrated into the mega corporation of Autodesk. And so it was a position of where do I best contribute, so we've landed on this with it's not just water, so it's really kind of like getting back to my roots of when I was the asset manager at Colorado Springs Utilities, right? We did electric, gas, water, wastewater, and also a lot of my ASCE involvement, right? So it's multi-industry, cross-public sector infrastructure, multi-phase asset life cycle, right? Autodesk is known for design build, but we now do planning, design, build, operate, maintain, rinse, repeat with rehabilitation, right? And start the asset life cycle all over again. So in water, we have this very, what we call cloud to sea infrastructure life cycle. But it blends well with transportation, right? Because where transportation and water intersect is clearly in, drainage, stormwater. And, it allows me to also kind of go, inside plant, outside plant, horizontal, linear networks, vertical assets. So, yeah, it's quite exciting. So I get to work with lots of different aspects of Autodesk. And Mike, I mean, we met just a couple weeks ago. Well, it's almost a month ago at Tech.
Yeah.
And one thing I realized on the floor, at Innovyze, we were very much into hydraulic modeling, and that's why, we were there as the water team. But it kind of struck me at Tech that like half that floor, the probably mechanical engineers and not civil engineers, right? I mean, there's a lot of pumps at
Yes.
And
so Tech is the Water Environment Foundation Technology Conference. This year it was in Chicago at McCormick Place, and there were like 16,000 people, and it was a really good conference.
It's kind of, we call it's the big sewer show, right? One of the largest sewer shows. Gosh, I used to go there, say back when I was at Colorado Springs, and we would go there to shop, right, for things, right? New CCTV camera systems or the latest vac truck, that's where you went kind of to go look at stuff. And so anyway, looking at Tech, being in the Autodesk booth, right? We had lots of customers come up asking us about, tools like Inventor and Fusion 360, because they're like, they make things. They actually make the pumps that are used in water and sewer. And as it dawned on me of like, wow, this is, the power of Autodesk. Now I get to not only do kind of water asset lifecycle, but the actual manufacturing of things and getting down into the minutia, like understanding transient pressures on impellers, within the pump. So it's like the entire spectrum is now at my fingertips, which is, I think, very exciting. So I couldn't be more happy about what I get to do in the future.
It's the full life cycle of assets.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Which kind of includes now the manufacturing of those assets.
As it should. Yeah. So, what does the title mean to you, and what you've been doing, and how you might have a slightly different trajectory, or are you keeping same course with the new title? What do you see?
Oh, I think, well, I think, as I mentioned, I think it's, it's the same, my role is to, connect the dots. Something I've been very passionate about in all these years, and it's one of these things where you feel like every step along your career prepares you for this ultimate, position. And I couldn't think of a better place to kind of start connecting those dots. I tell lots of people, I'm a professional 5-year-old, right? I get to run around going, why? And kind of disrupt the norm, right? I mean, I think we have lots of innovation within infrastructure, and it's just that lots of times we just don't know about it, right? It's like trying to connect the dots, and being exposed, because none of us can know everything, right? And I never pretend to know everything, but I now have an opportunity to work at an organization that is involved in so many aspects, right? The AEC portion of public infrastructure, the design and manufacturing of like making those pumps, and there's one more business unit that I can't wait to get into. I don't know if I'll have the chance, but Autodesk has a huge media and entertainment, the movie making side. So that would be amazing to start blending things that go on in Hollywood. I mean, who has better water graphics than like Avatar and Moana, Disney, all those things, right? So
I am so glad you mentioned that, because 10 years of Asset Leadership Network, and we're figuring out it's not the tools, those work. The processes are proven. it's the human behavior, it's the leadership driving the culture to influence the human behavior. And storytelling is the way to do that. So I am so glad to hear you say that you're interested in that storytelling aspect.
Well, that's, I'm exactly right. It's how, most of us, we struggle how to, make things resonate, right, with the asset owners, the customers, the bridging of why these programs are necessary. The moment kind of want to propose a rate increase, say for water, everyone's like, oh, they just want more money. And it's like, well, no, because we're doing this significant, capital improvement program. And it's going to take us we can't afford to do everything in 1 year. So it's going to take many years, right? And trying to understand the value and communicate that. It's all about the story. So, it is an exciting aspect to kind of understand how they do it. And the technology is pretty cool. We all think as engineers, we might understand Gantt charts and project planning, but my gosh, the software involved in making a movie now with actors and personas and camera angles and different lighting.
Music and colors and
Oh my
themes.
gosh, it's amazing what they can do, especially with like post-production. So, I think as civil engineers, we have a thing or two to learn from, movie directors and those folks over at Media Entertainment. So again, I'm excited to like blend all that. And I think that's the type of innovation we're looking for. Even like in, ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, where, we've got these future world vision kind of movies, if you will, and it's trying to portray, infrastructure of tomorrow, right? Floating cities and sustainable cities. And we kind of, ASCE, we turn to a company to help kind of visualize all that. Well, it's the same company that kind of works with the, Hollywood. So it does take that storytelling, that visualization to get people to connect the dots with infrastructure and what it means to them.
Director of Connecting the Dots.
There you go. Yes.
So speaking of connecting the dots and speaking of ASCE, what are you doing in that area? And are there any initiatives for 2024?
Well, gosh, yeah. I mean, I was very proud to serve, as the 2019 president, the Utility Engineering Surveying Institute, and you never just president for a year, right? You're a president-elect, then you're the president, then you're a past president. So there's 3 years of you're heavily involved with a given institute, and utility engineering makes sense. It's it's kind of the civil engineering within a utility construct, but also the surveying, the geomatics, the positioning, all that fun stuff. So right up my alley. But as you become past president, you continue to serve in a past president's council, and it's kind of like then corporate gets a hold of you, and you serve on lots of things. So I'm very active with the Sustainability Technical Committee. We are basically looking at all aspects of understanding sustainability, resiliency. And say we kind of mentioned the weather. People will say climate change, but I prefer the extreme weather because you can't deny that's happening. And it seems like we're having 100-year floods every year now. So it's
Right.
Things are obviously changed, and what the sustainability is looking at, there's technology for mitigation and technology for adaptation. So mitigation would be, how do we avert some of the global warming? But others are like, well, it's going to happen, regardless of cause. So let's figure out how to adapt. And so the Sustainability Technical Committee, we look at, supporting overall ASCE on the different technologies that can be deployed for, sustainability. Kind of switching a little bit, going from technical to more to, administrative policy. I am involved quite a bit with policy, government affairs, government relations, whatever you want to call it. I'm on the Infrastructure Research Policy Committee, and who knew that ASCE has 172 policy statements, right?
Wow.
And that span the 100 years of service that ASCE has been doing. And so, they come out with policy statements that say, we as an organization, feel strongly about X or Y. And there's 172 policy statements, right? And so we have to make sure they're modernized. So this committee, we pick out 20 or more, every year to modernize and adapt to the new kind of changing times, if you will. So try to make sure everything's at least on a 5-year cycle. And what's really interesting, and we knew this administration passed some has some movement on artificial intelligence, right? And you and I were talking a little bit earlier that I was asked to comment on artificial intelligence, and was asking, will AI and specifically Autodesk software ever kind of get into codifying the engineering standard of care? And of course the answer is no. Humans are the ones who go to school, get certified, they do their internship, they pass their exam, they're the ones that carry that PE license into court. And I don't see us ever kind of tossing that responsibility over to AI. I mean, AI is a great decision assist tool, right? Yeah. It's not going to make that decision for you. So we're looking at we probably need a policy on AI, right? And so again, that policy committee is constantly trying to look at all aspects of civil engineering, and as a society come out with a statement on that.
Well, Biden's infrastructure policy released this week, it looks good from what I have seen. And so I'm sure you guys will be kicking that a bit to help you with yours.
Right, because ASCE, we obviously have a very strong involvement with Congress. The infrastructure report card, obviously the IIJA that's passed, is unprecedented, right? And so and we can't let our foot off the gas, right? 1.2 trillion was a lot of money, but it's still a drop in the bucket considering the overall need across the entire United States, right? And so, that's one thing I've been very proud to be involved with ASCE as well, is they've been holding a series of infrastructure roundtables, right? The Government Affairs Division gets to bring together certain leaders, and we get to have very frank discussions, right, of what's working, what's not working. So that's another part of the thing, and of course always bringing in asset management, right, into the conversation, because everyone kind of knows the term's getting better used, right? And that kind of because one of the fourth aspects of my involvement, as mentioned, that was on the title slide, a voting member to the U.S. Technical Advisory Group to ISO TC 251, which authors the ISO 55000 standard on asset management. And even in the infrastructure report card, I think we've had this conversation before, is previous report cards, asset management never existed. Then it got half a dozen comments, and now it jumped up to 20 or 30 comments or mentions. So I think the conversation is getting into civil engineering, it's getting into public infrastructure. But again, I have to quote that amazing document from 2017 on ISO 55000, especially as a working group 4, titled or authored a document called Managing Assets in the Context of Asset Management, right there. And there's a very brilliant table that kind of talks about managing assets, which I think most civil engineers can relate to, versus asset management, right? The the more programmatic leadership sort of issues that like we at the ALN talk about, right?
Yes.
And so, it's blending, getting civil engineers to, again, managing assets. I think they're very good at that, right? They're, applying the latest technology, materials management, especially in decarbonization. We know what to do. We can do this. But, when you say, hey, are you thinking about risk? And you ask the organization, how much risk are you willing to take? Are you willing to adjust your funding mechanisms? Do you have a training program for the next generation technology? All these sort of leadership sort of things are like, well, is that our job? And I think that it is, right? And I think that's starting to get blended into our academia. But quite honestly, the reason I'm on behalf of ASCE UESI involved with ISO 55000 too is we have not only do we have policies, but we have great standards on public infrastructure. And ASCE 7 is one that comes top of mind on hazards within the US, right? This is how you should be take into account wind shear. This is how you should be prepared for earthquakes. This is how you should be prepared for flood. That ASCE 7 is very much involved in public infrastructure, and we would love to get ASCE standards as being referred to almost as annex to the ISO 55000 standard. I know it's more on the managing assets, but it creeps into the conversation of leadership, in all stages.
Interesting. How is that being received?
Slow.
As all things are in the standard world.
Yeah. I've very much learned, and we had our global assembly right there in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, outside of Philly, where the world came to us, and we had our delegations, of ISO 55000, and man, what an education, right? And what an interesting concept of people, just discussing semantics and vocabulary, right? It's I think very interesting. It's an amazing process to witness at a global scale.
Yeah, excellent. Jim Dieter said writing the first ISO 55000 series was like getting a master's, and the rewrite has been like getting a doctorate.
Yeah, I could see how that those are very appropriate labels for sure.
So what's going on in the water industry? I mean, it's great. I'm so happy that you're involved in strategy for all assets, but your sweet spot is water. So what's going on there?
Oh yeah, I'll never never not be involved in water. I mean, I right out of school I became a a groundwater hydrologist for the state of Arizona. So very much always be water. And AWWA released its top 10 issues, and my experience has always been like, well, the top 10 today were very much part of the top 10 years ago, and I'm sure we'll be part of the top 10 years from now, right? I mean, and top of the list is renewal and replacement of aging water infrastructure, right? So, and that was really kind of addressed in the IIJA, but again, just a drop in the bucket, if we use water analogies, right? So it's there's always more need than funding, and what we found even with this infusion of funding, there's almost too much funding for the system to process, right? Much of it has gone through the state revolving funds, and so having just sufficient EPA staff to process all the paperwork, having utilities with ready to go projects, right, to highlight and address some of the green infrastructure needs that are kind of in some of the language, right? It's just and just even the civil engineering firms having qualified engineers and buying the materials to even do the projects, right? So that it's an interesting state where we got this infusion of money, but yet the process is almost overwhelmed, right? So it's a good problem to have, to be in civil engineering right now, but it's also, kind of highlighted some of the challenges we've had, and they're not going away. So I think 10 years from now, we'll still be talking about, aging infrastructure, but along with all that's the financing aspects, which kind of highlighted this, and is there going to be more private public, participation, the PPPs and things like that. Again, with extreme weather, droughts and floods, so supply is always an issue. They've talked about aging infrastructure. There's also aging workforce, right? So folks, with my color of hair, are we leaving? Are we staying in the industry? I'm rejuvenated. I want to be here another 20 years, right? There's so much work.
I'm with you.
So it's like, though, how are we dealing with folks? And we still have the digital transformation, right? People getting used to wanting to run a utility on a phone, right? Which is kind of a new way of thinking, but that's the next generation, right? They're very skilled and very digitally inclined, and that's how they want to, do their jobs. And so how we're adjusting to that, and just trying to get the public to understand, the value of all this. Because again, in water, specific to water, I still hear, a comment of like, why is water so expensive? It's free, right? It just falls from the sky. And that is like the number one mistake, because, well, okay, fine, then you take a shower, you do all that from water that falls from the sky. They don't realize how much it takes to collect the water, treat the water to drinking water standards, to provide pumps that pressurize it so you can have a nice hot shower. There's just the public understanding. I used to call it line of sight, from basically, from the reservoir, the lake, to the kitchen sink. People don't see that line of sight, and that's a good thing, right? That's what we've tried so hard, is they don't need to worry about it. But that's caused issues of trying to explain some of the needs that we now have. So there's those have been issues for many years. What is kind of creeping in, is obviously cybersecurity, right? As we digitally transform, people are wanting to make sure that these systems aren't hacked, right? I mean, it's a horrible thing to have your bank account hacked,
Yes.
or your financial institution hacked, by cyber criminals. But, kind of like, what we saw there in the treatment plant down in Florida, where, hackers hacked in and changed I believe it was the hydrogen sulfide mixtures. That's serious, right? That's affecting public health, right? And so, we cybersecurity is top of mind, and there's some really good experts that are involved, and there's even technology that helps, buffer that, right? So, yes, utilities can operate in the cloud securely, safely, but it's just right now there's a stigma of, I don't want to even expose myself to that. So, so there's just a lot going on in water. I think, we are finding, we've always worried about water quality issues. We're finding now water quantity issues are, top of mind as well. And so it's a very complex industry, but I love it. And
well, I'm glad you brought up the 10 items for 2024, and I shared them in the chat, because when you look at all of them, you realize this is now a leadership issue. This is not a managing asset issue. It's a asset leadership issue. And I wonder, well, go ahead. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, yeah, very much so, right? Because now what we're finding is the needs are so overwhelming that even like small systems are challenged with, how are we supposed to respond, right? I have to have resources to do this. And so you're starting to have regional watershed discussions now, which, very much involves leadership. Because I have to, kind of reach out to my neighbors and say, hey, we have this problem. They're like, hey, we have this problem, and now leaders have to get together and try and resolve some of these things and pool their resources, right? So yeah, it very much is becoming a water leadership sort of that's our pathway to resolving some of these issues.
Well, if people don't mind, if we go just a little over, I would like to ask you how the ALN can help you in your leadership position. What can we do to help amplify what you're already doing and where you want to go?
Well, I think we do this by educating. We do this by getting the word out. We do this by talking about ISO 55000 and talking about that difference of, are you managing assets or are you doing asset management? And that's just I think people are very, they think they're doing asset management when they're simply managing assets, and that's good. That's a great start, but we know it's going to take leadership and people understanding the programmatic value of defining asset management principles, defining organizational structures, understanding that risk is a holistic organizational discussion, not just one particular group. So I think ALN does great in advertising that, right? Many of us are also involved with the tag, and here in the US, we started our own campus website, community of asset management practitioners in the US. Tried to make it very easy, very non-threatening, very friendly, right? So asset folks embarking upon their asset management journey, whether they're beginners or seasoned experts, they all have a home on campus. We talk a little bit more about that, but it's I think the ALN is doing what it needs to do by kind of invoking the conversation at all levels. So just I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk a bit about just what's going on in what I'm doing in asset management at ASCE, just keep doing the things you guys are what you're doing.
Excellent. Well, we are honored to have you as an ALN Senior Fellow and to tag along with you as you're growing in your success and your outreach. It's just a real pleasure for us. So thanks for checking in with us occasionally and inform us what you're doing. I believe we've got a report card coming up in 2024. It's every 4 years. The election year, I believe, so that it's published for the new president. So
I'm trying to, gosh, what was the last report card? I'm having a little mental.
I believe it was 2020. I think that they do it the year of the election so that the report card can come out for the new president to act on the information.
Yeah.
So late in 2024.
I know they're working hard on the next one already.
Yeah. Excellent. So congratulations once again. And thank you for joining us. Nick, if you want to bring us home.
Sure. Yeah, thanks again to our Platinum organizational member, Onuma System, and our ALN patron members, Definitive Logic, ABS Quality Evaluations, CGI, and Jacobs, and all our organizational members. Thank you for your continued support to do programs like this. And if you're wondering if you'd like to work with us, we would love to talk. That's how it begins. And upcoming events include this Airports Asset Leadership Board program featuring a keynote from the Denver International Airport CEO. And that is next week.
A 1 hour program.
A 1 hour program next week at this time. Also featuring these panelists. And we've heard from some of them before, but look forward to hearing from them again. As many threads from this discussion will be present in that, even though different industry. Talking about leadership nonetheless. And one more plug for the A55K professional certification training. We discussed ISO 55000 a few times today. So please, if you're at all interested, it is worth your time. Reach out to us or the Andrew James Advisory Group to get in that course.
So thank you
everyone.
Thanks everyone for attending, and David, once again, what a pleasure. Thank you.
Fastest 30 minutes we ever see.
All
Thank you so much.
right, bye for now.
Bye.